think working with buyers is like an interesting situation because you're negotiating with the seller to get them the house, but you're also trying to keep them as clients and making sure that you're not pushing them to the extreme. So, a lot of times I find that the buyers may not get the first property, and I kind of struggle with like, should I push them to get the first property, because sometimes it almost seems too easy. And I would like to hear kind of your feedback, after I talk. But like basically, when I'm working with buyers, I let them know what the market situation is. Depending upon what areas they're looking in, they may be in a very, very competitive situation. We need to get there as soon as possible once it hits the market. And if it's a property that there's just a lot of inventory, I let them know that too. That it may take 1, 2, 3, or 4 tries to get something to go through if they're trying to get a good deal, but just make sure that they're prepared and know, and that if they don't get it, to not be so devastated. Because the conversation I usually have with a buyer when we first find the first property that they're interested in, or any property actually, I usually ask them like, how much do you like the property? Obviously, you like the property enough to make an offer, but if somebody else were to buy it and the seller accepted the offer, is it the end of the world?
Right.
Sometimes they say, yes, absolutely, like this is the house. If that's the case, you need to do everything you can to get that property for them. But if they're like, I'll live, then, they can just kind of, make the offer that they're comfortable with, so they don't feel so exerted and pushed to the point that they're like, you're just trying to earn a commission.
And I break that down even further, because I'll go to their lender to know how much it costs per dollar for them, and I'll say, that's $6 a month, or that's $7 a month, or that's a Starbucks once a month. Because $1,000, $2,000 doesn't seem much to us, but to them sometimes they're still, or $5,000, like $5,000. Okay, so that's $30 a month. So, and I'll always say, and I get that, $30, that's, that's not inconsequential when you have kids and this, that, and the other. But if you don't love the house enough for $30 a month, you probably don't love it enough for that to be your house anyways.
Amortized over 30 years or even 15, it's
usually
nothing.
hardly
So
noticeable oftentimes.
you need to think more in terms of a range of what your offer is going to be than an exact price sometimes. Because if they're going, I will not pay a penny over $300,000 or whatever it is, for 302 you might have it. I mean, don't assume that there's a definite stop point.
There's a lot of times I also ask the buyer like how long they plan to stay at the property too. Is like how much am I going to push them? Because even if you do have that $5,000 gap, if they're trying to sell within 3 to 4 years, that eventually is going to hit them down the road, even if they don't experience it now. So that's part of the things I try to take into consideration, so that they are thinking big picture instead of just this.
That's a good point. Yeah. I think, again, buyers setting expectations at the buyer appointment and letting them know if they're in a 250 and under range where we are, then we just let them know that to get an offer, then we're going to need to run. It's going to need to be most likely full price. Sometimes you're going to have to budge some on the closing costs. And, if they're just not in a position to do that, then I educate them through statistics. I educate them through sold comps to show how fast it was on the market, list price, sales price ratios, subsidies. And if, I think a lot of that, if they still aren't getting it, it usually only takes one to lose. And then they recognize that. But I find that you really don't have to go down that road nearly as much. If they're really educated and they're serious about buying, then typically they want that. If you're partnering with them and really a team and you're excited for them, it makes a big difference.
I've worked in both the Northern Virginia and the Central Virginia market. And Northern Virginia, sometimes if you find the right house, you have to explain, as Amy said, you have to get over there right away, look at it, and make your offer. There's no time to joke around about this. And I did have one client who had teenagers and the phone was busy all the time, and I drove over to his house and pounded on the door, and he was in his undershirt and a pair of shorts. I said, come with me right now. This is it. And he did, and that's the one they bought. But, I had to be kind of obnoxious. But, I knew, because we looked at a lot of homes and made a couple offers, I knew that was it, and doggone it, I was not going to let him lose that house.
If you've done all the background work and you've gone over the contract with them, you've talked about earnest money, you've talked about home inspection.
You have it written already, pretty much.
You've already made sure they are well informed with their lender, they're pre-qualified, they've gotten all their asset documentation in. We've talked about home inspections, home inspectors, we've talked about, radon tests. We've talked about so much that they don't have a hesitation to take the plunge because the fear's been removed. on the things that they're not sure about. So the further,
Right.
like the more intense you can go with that, and the more you remind them and educate as you're showing houses, you know, that this is kind of how it works, then I find that they're much more ready to take that plunge. You know, they don't have necessarily the fear that they have if they don't know what they're doing.